in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My spoiled son got his girlfriend pregnant. I demanded responsibility and I slapped him. I never imagined that 9 months later my life would change completely. 4 years ago, I met and married my husband Finn. I have a 19-year-old son named Ross from my previous marriage. He is currently studying at university. My first marriage was to John, Ross's biological father, who is extremely abusive. I was very young when I met him, and our relationship was a nightmare from the start. John was a classic narcissist. He always prioritized his needs and used manipulation to keep me under his control. At first, I didn't see the warning signs. I was too naive to realize what was happening. He initially captivated me, he made me feel special, and he completely dazzled me. It looked like love, but in reality, it was a carefully prepared trap. When I became pregnant with Ross, everything changed dramatically. John used my pregnancy as a way of tightening his grip on me. He saw my situation as an advantage to keep me by his side and under his control. He overwhelmed me with displays of affection, gifts, and constant attention, but it was all just a way of manipulating me. Every time I tried to walk away or defend myself, he used guilt to make me stay. He convinced me that I needed him and that leaving would hurt my baby. I was terrified, confused, and completely overwhelmed, so when he pressed me to get married, I gave in and said yes. I naively thought it might improve our situation, but it turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. What followed was 12 years of a deeply toxic relationship. He constantly belittled me, made me feel insignificant, and destroyed my confidence little by little, day after day. I felt like I was walking on eggshells all the time. John had this ability to twist any situation to make it seem like it was my fault. Every problem, every mistake, every argument. He demeaned me as a person, both in private and in front of others, and treated me as if I had no value. Living with him was a real nightmare. He had an explosive temper that could flare up over the most insignificant things, and it was impossible to reason with him when he was angry. John was unable to hold down a job because of his combative personality and his constant need to confront coworkers or superiors. This only added more stress to my life because I had to figure out how to make ends meet without his support. He was also obsessively jealous. He constantly accused me of things I hadn't done, questioned my every move, and tried to control who I talked to or spent time with. He gradually isolated me from the people who cared about me. He drove a wedge between me and my close friends and family, cutting me off from the support I so desperately needed. To this day, I deeply regret not leaving him sooner. I sometimes think about all those years I spent trying to make things work, naively hoping the situation would change, but it never did. I stayed far longer than I should have, and I paid a heavy price for that decision. When I finally found the courage to leave him, I knew it had to be for good. I moved far, far away with Ross to start a new life in a city where John couldn't find us. Fortunately, I was granted full custody of my son, which was the only thing that really mattered to me. Although the court ordered John to pay child support, he never fulfilled that obligation. Honestly, I didn't care about the money. All I wanted was to keep my son safe and build a life where we could be free from John's oppressive shadow. Once we moved away from my ex, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted from our shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like we could breathe freely. I knew that life as a single mother would not be easy, but I was determined to give Ross the life he deserved. I took on several jobs, working long hours to make ends meet, but every effort was worth it. I wanted Ross to grow up feeling loved and supported, and I made sure to give him opportunities that I never had. When I met Finn, I honestly didn't think anything serious could come of it. He was an incredibly charming, financially stable man who seemed to have his life perfectly organized. A stark contrast to my situation as a struggling single mother. At the time, I was juggling work, bills, and raising Ross on my own. I didn't think someone like Finn would have any genuine interest in someone like me, but I agreed to go on a date with him because a mutual friend insisted we would be a great match. To my surprise, the date went wonderfully well. Finn was easy to talk to, warm and attentive, but even as I said goodbye that night, I didn't allow myself to get my hopes up. I thought it would be a one-off. a passing fancy that would remain a fond memory. After all, why would someone with his stability, financial security, and success want to keep dating someone like me? But Finn completely surprised me. Not only did he call me again, but he showed a genuine interest in my life and who I was as a person. We started seeing each other more often, and, gradually, I found myself falling deeply in love with him. What really melted my heart was his enthusiasm for meeting Ross. Finn seemed genuinely interested in being part of my son's life. When they finally met, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders because they hit it off immediately. Seeing Ross and Finn laugh and connect so naturally was an immense relief. And it made me realize that Finn wasn't just someone I could imagine a future with. He was also someone who could become a wonderful father figure for Ross. When Finn and I decided to get married, it wasn't just because I loved him deeply, but also because I saw how much he cared for my son and how naturally he took on the role of stepfather. Every day since our wedding, Finn has shown how kind, supportive, and considerate he is. He constantly strives to make me feel valued. And he is always there for Ross, whether offering advice, sharing moments of joy, or supporting him at important times in his life. I feel incredibly lucky to have him as my husband and as a father figure for Ross. That said, things haven't been perfect. Although Ross has fully accepted Finn and respects him as if he were his own father, I have noticed changes in my son that sometimes leave me with mixed feelings. Finn is extremely wealthy, and after our marriage, he made it clear that he enjoys spending his money on us. He showers us with gifts, designer clothes, the latest technological devices, and everything we could possibly want. Finn also loves taking us on luxurious vacations to exotic destinations, the kind of trips I could only dream of before. I admit it, I too enjoy these comforts. Who wouldn't? But my upbringing has left me with certain values that are difficult to abandon. I grew up learning to stretch every dollar and save money whenever possible, and to never take anything for granted. Even after marrying Finn, I can't help but maintain these habits. I still use discount coupons, compare prices, and think twice before buying something expensive. Ross, on the other hand, has embraced this new lifestyle without the slightest hesitation. He is living the kind of life that I could never have provided for him on my own. And although I am glad that he is finally getting everything he has ever wanted, sometimes I worry that he is becoming a bit spoiled, beginning to expect only the best that life has to offer. And although I don't want to diminish his happiness, there are times when I feel that he is losing touch with the values that I worked so hard to instill in him. For example, on his 18th birthday, Ross insisted on buying a top-of-the-range luxury car for himself, a vehicle that cost more than a year's income when I was a single mother. I immediately refused. It was excessively extravagant and unnecessary, and I didn't think an 18-year-old needed a car like that. But Ross wasn't willing to take no for an answer. Instead of respecting my decision, he went straight to Finn and asked him to buy the car. Finn, being as generous as he is, gave in to Ross's request, thinking it would make him happy. I didn't want to start a conflict, so I reluctantly agreed, hoping Ross would appreciate such a significant gift and act responsibly. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The same night Ross received the car, he went out with friends to celebrate at a club, consumed far more alcohol than he could handle, and ended up crashing the vehicle on the way home. I was terrified when I found out, grateful that no one was seriously injured, but deeply distressed that Ross had been so irresponsible. He was arrested that night, and although he did not serve time in prison, he had to complete community service as part of his sentence. What struck me most, however, was not the accident or even the arrest. It was Ross's attitude after the incident. He showed no genuine remorse for what had happened. He played it down as if it were of no importance, blaming bad luck instead of taking responsibility for his bad decisions. This incident was a serious wake-up call for me, but it didn't seem to affect Ross at all. Since then, his spending habits have spiraled out of control. Finn and I provide him with a credit card for his monthly expenses, with a set limit to cover necessities and some occasional extras. But Ross constantly exceeds those limits. He spends thousands of dollars every month on new video games, expensive watches, and other unnecessary luxuries. When his card reaches its limit, he comes to us for more funds, often pressuring Finn to top up the account. Finn finds it difficult to refuse, and I feel trapped in the middle, trying to set limits that Ross simply does not respect. What hurts me the most, however, is how his behavior towards others has changed. Ross used to be a kind and considerate person, someone who respected everyone regardless of their background or profession. I raised him to treat people kindly no matter their circumstances. But over the past 2 years, I have noticed a worrying change. He has become derogatory and even rude to people he considers inferior to him. For example, every time we go out to eat, he treats the waiters disrespectfully in restaurants, behaving as if they don't deserve his time or consideration. He yells at them for the most insignificant mistakes and doesn't even bother to say please or thank you. At home, he is equally disrespectful to our domestic staff, treating them as if they were invisible, or even worse, as if they were only there to serve him. Finn and I have tried to talk to him about this on multiple occasions. We have explained to him how important it is to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their job or social position. But Ross refuses to take us seriously. He dismisses our concerns, claiming that it is not important how he addresses working-class people, and that those who do these jobs accepted this treatment by choosing these professions, as if that justified his behavior. It has been devastating to witness this side of him. This is not the Ross I raised with so much love. I do not recognize this arrogant and contemptuous young man who seems to have forgotten the difficulties we went through together. To make matters worse, I have also noticed that Ross has superficial relationships with numerous girls. He is always involved with someone new. About 4 months ago, he introduced me to a young woman named Carly. She was blonde, sweet, and possessed a quiet confidence that set her apart. Of all the girlfriends Ross has introduced me to, Carly was the one who left the most lasting impression. She seemed intelligent, kind, and down-to-earth. Someone who genuinely cared about my son. I had hoped that, maybe this time, Ross had found someone who could help him settle down, someone who could bring out the best in him. Unfortunately, just 2 months later, Ross and Carly ended their relationship, and when I asked why, I discovered that it was because Ross had been unfaithful to her. I was disappointed, although not completely surprised, given his recent pattern of behavior. Even after their breakup, Carly and I maintained a connection through social media. Occasionally, she would like or comment on my posts, and I appreciated those small interactions. She seemed like a genuinely good person, and I felt bad about how things had ended between her and Ross. This brings us to the present. At the beginning of this week, Carly contacted me directly, sending me a message asking if we could meet in person because she had something important to communicate. Her message conveyed a sense of urgency that piqued my curiosity. She also specifically asked me not to mention anything about this meeting to Ross. Carly explained that only after talking to me could she decide whether or not to bring up the subject with my son. I was intrigued and slightly concerned. What could she possibly need to tell me that required this level of confidentiality? I agreed to meet with her, and 3 days ago we met for the first time since she and Ross had ended their relationship. Carly looked noticeably nervous as she began to explain that she is pregnant, and Ross is the father. Apparently, she had taken several pregnancy tests in the previous month and confirmed her condition. She informed me that she had already told Ross about the situation, but he categorically refused to accept it. As Carly spoke, tears began to well up in her eyes, and she explained that she had never been someone who had casual relationships or intimacy with just anyone. Ross was the only man she had been intimate with in a long time, and she had truly loved him. She admitted how devastated she felt when she discovered that he had been unfaithful to her, but even then, she never imagined that she would end up pregnant after their breakup. Carly went on to reveal that Ross had been putting intense pressure on her to have an abortion. Her voice trembled as she explained how divided she felt, caught between what my son demanded and what her own heart and beliefs dictated. Carly comes from a deeply religious background, and for her, abortion was not an option that could be considered lightly. She confessed to me how terrified she was, not only of the decision itself, but of the pressure Ross had been putting on her to do it. What hurt me the most was hearing how my son had been treating her. According to Carly, Ross had called her a gold digger and other cruel terms, accusing her of trying to trap him with a pregnancy. He even gave her an ultimatum. Either she terminated the pregnancy or she kept the baby but could never count on him for any kind of support, be it financial, emotional, or any other kind. He made it clear that if she chose to have the child, he would completely disengage from the situation. I was speechless. I couldn't believe the harshness of Ross's words and actions. This was not the son I thought I had raised. I had taught him to take responsibility for his actions, to be kind and respectful to others, and to always treat people with empathy. But listening to Carly's story made me realize how far he had strayed from those values. With tears streaming down her face, Carly explained why she had come to me for help. She admitted that she couldn't have an abortion, but she didn't know how to raise a baby on her own either. She confessed that she didn't have the financial means to support a child, and her family would probably reject her once they found out about her pregnancy. She was terrified of being forced to give up the baby, and the thought of her child ending up in foster care or being raised by strangers broke her heart. It was then that Carly said something that took me completely by surprise. She asked me if I would be willing to adopt the baby. She explained that she was prepared to give up the child and hand over full custody to me if I agreed to take on that responsibility. Carly said that she was even willing to have no part in the child's life if it meant avoiding further confusion or instability. All she wanted was for the baby to grow up in a safe and loving environment, and she firmly believed that my husband Finn and I could provide that environment. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. "But I know you're a good person. I saw how much you care about your son. I know you'd care about this baby too." I stood there, frozen in shock, trying to process everything she had just shared with me. My heart broke for her as I listened to her words. Part of me wanted to immediately say yes and assure Carly that her baby would be safe and loved no matter what. But another part of me felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was asking. Adopting a baby is a life-changing decision. A choice that would affect not only me and Finn, but also Ross. I knew exactly what she was going through as a woman. I could see that she genuinely cared about her unborn child, and she was even willing to give him up just to ensure he had a good life with us. I gently but firmly asked her to forget everything for a moment. I suggested that she think only of herself and her baby, and I asked her the most important question: what do you really want? Carly admitted that she wished her pregnancy had happened under different circumstances, at a more opportune time in her life, when she was better prepared. "Even though it's not how I imagined it," she said with a firm voice and conviction, "I've come to accept it. I've accepted that this is happening, and now I feel at peace with it. If it were up to me, and if circumstances were different, I would keep this baby. I already love it." Hearing this, I felt a lump in my throat. I told Carly that I needed time to reflect, time to talk to my husband Finn, and, most importantly, time to confront my son. So yesterday, Finn and I confronted Ross about the situation. Initially, my son tried to deny everything, but I informed him that I had already met with Carly, that I had seen the pregnancy tests, and that I had heard the full story directly from her. At that point, his denial crumbled and he changed strategy. He began to blame Carly for the pregnancy, arguing that it was her responsibility to take precautions. She should have been using contraception, he argued, as if that absolved him of all responsibility. I felt my indignation growing, but I kept my voice firm and calm. "Ross," I said, "it takes two people to create a life. You can't just shift all the blame onto her. You are as responsible for what happened as she is." Ross reacted with disdain. His tone oozed indifference. "I want nothing to do with that kid. She's deliberately trying to trap me. Honestly, why can't you just pay Carly some money to keep quiet or something? Women today are only interested in money anyway. She probably got pregnant on purpose, just to get some of our money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the child I had raised, fought for, and loved with every fiber of my being, was suggesting that I should bribe Carly to terminate her pregnancy as if it were of no importance. He spoke so matter-of-factly as if Carly had somehow gotten pregnant on her own, as if he had played no part in the situation. My son continued to refer to Carly in terms that I prefer not to repeat here. Hearing this, a deep and burning anger grew inside me, one that I couldn't contain. Before I knew what I was doing, I slapped Ross hard across the face. The room was plunged into absolute silence. Ross looked at me with wide, speechless eyes, holding his cheek in disbelief. Even Finn, who had been trying to reason with him moments before, was paralyzed, not knowing what to say. "You have no right to call yourself a man," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "A real man takes responsibility for his actions. A real man doesn't run away from his mistakes or blame someone else for his decisions. A real man certainly doesn't treat the mother of his child as if she were insignificant." Ross opened his mouth as if to protest, but I raised a hand to stop him. "I understand if you don't want to have children," I continued, my voice firming. "But that conversation is over. It doesn't matter anymore because, guess what? You're going to be a father, whether you like it or not. Maybe you should have considered that before and used protection if you weren't prepared to face the consequences." My son's face turned an intense shade of red. The shame and anger were evident. He opened and closed his mouth repeatedly, struggling to articulate a response. Before he could utter a word, my husband, who had remained quiet and thoughtful throughout my confrontation, finally spoke up. "Ross," he said, "your mother is right. Carly has made it clear that she wants to keep this baby, and that is her decision. It is her body. It is not up to you or anyone else to dictate what she does with it. If you don't want to be involved in this child's life, that is one thing. But to try to pressure her into doing something she doesn't want to do is not only wrong, it is extremely cruel. It is time for you to grow up and face the consequences of your actions." Since then, my son has refused to speak to us. He claims that we are wrong for what we have said, accusing us of trying to force him to become a father. He insists that by supporting Carly's decision, we are somehow undermining him and taking sides against him. So tell me, am I the problem? Update 1. In answer to some of the most frequently asked questions, yes, we will definitely carry out a paternity test to confirm that the baby is Ross's, but honestly, I really trust Carly. I feel deeply moved by her situation. She is a young woman who never expected her life to take such an unexpected turn. And although I understand that Ross may feel conflicted or insecure, I cannot ignore the reality of Carly's situation. For anyone who is concerned about her, they can rest assured. I fully understand what it means to be a single mother, so I will do everything in my power to support her. I am very familiar with the difficulties of raising a child without help. Raising Ross on my own without the support of his father was extremely challenging. I had to make countless sacrifices, and I understand what it means to put your child's needs before your own. Carly is now in a similar situation, and I will not allow her to feel that she is facing this alone. I am by her side, and I will make sure that she feels supported and protected at all times. No, I am not pressuring Ross to marry Carly or try to rebuild their relationship. I would never try to force him to do something he doesn't want to do. However, what I do expect from him is responsibility and accountability. Carly didn't get pregnant by herself. Ross was just as involved in this situation as she was. Even if he doesn't want to raise the child or be part of its life, the least he can do is show some respect and kindness towards Carly. She is going through an intensely difficult period emotionally, physically, and mentally, and he has a duty to recognize that as a decent human being. For now, Finn and I plan to consult with a lawyer and explore our options. We need to determine what is in the best interest of everyone involved, especially the baby. Update 2. It's been several months since my last update, and I've been extremely busy. For those of you who are still following this story, I wanted to update you on recent developments. Carly gave birth this week. Unfortunately, her parents refused to accompany her and be by her side during the delivery, which really broke my heart. But I was there, holding her hand, offering her my support and making sure she didn't feel alone at that crucial moment. It wasn't an easy experience for her, but I'm proud of the strength she showed throughout the process. After the baby was born, the first thing we did was to carry out a paternity test, and it confirmed that my son is indeed the father. Honestly, I didn't even consider it necessary to take the test because the baby bears a remarkable resemblance to Ross as a newborn. It's impossible to deny the kinship. However, it was somewhat surreal to hold my grandson in my arms and know that this little one is part of our family despite the complicated circumstances surrounding his arrival. I have now taken Carly into my home, where she is recovering and breastfeeding her baby. Meanwhile, Finn and I are helping her with the care of the little one. Ross, predictably, has not even communicated with her and has flatly refused to meet his son. But you know what? Finn and I have decided not to pursue him or to insist. He has made it very clear that he does not wish to be involved in this situation, and we are not going to force him to take responsibility if he is not willing to do so. We have accepted his decision and are focusing on what is best for Carly and the baby at this time. If Ross eventually changes his mind, we will deal with the situation then, but for now we are moving forward without his participation. In addition, Carly has decided to retain custody of the baby, and we have agreed to support her every step of the way. She can stay with us for as long as she needs to, especially considering that her family has practically rejected her and refuses to accept her in these circumstances. Finn and I are genuinely happy to have her and the baby with us. Yes, it has been overwhelming at times, but when I look at that little face, it's worth all the effort. Carly and the baby are now part of our family. As for the issue of child support, we have made the decision to use some of the money we had set aside for Ross to complete his university studies to cover the baby's needs. As you can imagine, Ross is furious about this decision and considers it deeply unfair. We are using his reserved university fund. My son is concerned that there won't be enough money left to fund the rest of his university years, but I have made it clear to him that if that is the case, then he will have to take out a student loan and work to pay it off himself. Ross needs to understand that the world does not revolve exclusively around him and that life does not always conform to our expectations. Update 3. Wow, I see a lot of comments on my post after my recent update. I have noticed that many of you support my decision to use Ross's university fund to cover child support payments. I implemented this measure to teach my son the value of responsibility. However, my son told me directly that he thinks I have changed since I remarried and that he now despises me just because I am using his university funds to support Carly's child. Those words hurt me deeply, more than I would like to admit. Hearing your own child, the person you have raised with love and dedication for years, express himself in that way is incredibly painful. So I replied directly, you know what? You have changed considerably too. The son I raised would have shown more kindness towards his ex-partner and would have shown more consideration for his own son. We have never demanded that you help Carly or the baby, and we are definitely not trying to force you to get involved. But contributing to child support is the legally correct and morally appropriate thing to do. If you have a problem with that, then it is something you must resolve on your own. You can despise me if you want. You can even hate me. But as a woman and as a mother, I would never abandon Carly and my grandson as you have done. I am convinced that this conversation did not change anything at that moment, but I remain hopeful that one day Ross will understand that this is about teaching him a fundamental lesson about responsibility and accountability. It is a lesson that he urgently needs to assimilate. However, for now, he is simply furious with us and refuses to consider the situation from our perspective.